Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Parsha Shir. We're studying Shaar, Hayichud, Ve'emunah, and today, with Hashem's help, we're actually going to begin studying Perek Gimel, chapter 3. So, first, a very brief and short summary of the first two chapters. The principle with which the Alter Rebbe begins Shaar, Hayichud, Ve'emunah is the idea that Hashem's creation of the world, creating all existing things, Bruim, created beings, is not something that happened once in the 6 days of creation. And from then on, the world exists on its own until such point as Hashem, decides that it should no longer exist. Rather, creation is continuous. Hashem is recreating every created being that was created the first time is recreated every single second. The Alter Rebbe has for this, number one, a mokar, a source. He attributes this to the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov on the pasuk L'olam Hashem dvorcha nitzav b'shamayim. Forever Hashem, your words stand firm in the heaven, which the Baal Shem Tov interprets to be referring to the words that Hashem said to bring the world into existence. Those worlds remain constantly in the heavens. In existence, to bring it into to recreate it every single second. The Alter Rebbe connects this to the teaching of the Ari, who writes, quote, "Shegam b'doimim mamash k'mo yavonim v'ofer umayim yesh b'chinas nefesh v'chayis ruchnis." The Alter Rebbe writes that everything has a soul and a spiritual divine energy. Everything, even stones, dirt, and water. The Alter Rebbe explains this, interprets this to mean not just that it contains a soul, not just that it contains a divine mission, that it contains a godly element, that it contains a vitalizing ingredient, but rather that this refers to that this godly force has to be constantly invested in it for the sake of its existence. Point 3, the Alter Rebbe deals at great length with what exactly is the nature of this godly force that constantly recreates these things over and over again. What's the address, if you will? Where does it come from? The Alter Rebbe says it comes from the Asar Mamoros, the 10 utterances that Hashem used, that Hashem declared to bring the world into existence. Deals at length with the fact that the 10 utterances only explicitly name 10 creations. Light, heavens, water, fish, things like that, and explains that those creations that are articulated explicitly in the Asar Mamoros are much larger. These are the larger creations. The smaller creations need a much more mitzumtzum, much more filtered down godly energy, and so the divine letters of the Asar Mamoros get filtered down. They go through 231 different types of evolution or de-evolution, devolution, whatever the word is, until they get filtered down into each existed being according to its level, according to its existence. The Alter Rebbe, that's point 3, let's say. Point 4, the Alter Rebbe addresses the fact that these Asar Mamoros are Asar Mamoros Shebet Torah. We spoke about the significance of that, and how in the end the conclusion is that these letters actually become the name of the particular created being. So in the case of the Alter Rebbe's analogy with an Evan, with a stone, the letters Aleph, Beis, Nun become the Kalim, become the vessels through which Hashem's light, life, and energy from the Asar Mamoros filter down into this created being. In Perek Beis, the Alter Rebbe makes the case that this is not just a Masorah, this is not just a tradition we have from the Baal Shem Tov. This is actually also logical. And those who deny this, disagree with it, are not just denying Hashgacha Pratis and the miracles of Torah, but they're also misunderstanding the concept of creation of the world, because they compare it to the handiwork of a person, which is yesh miyesh, whereas Hashem's creation of the world is yesh ma'ayin. And yesh ma'ayin, by nature, by logic, must be constant. If it were to stop for a second, the created being would cease to exist. The proof for this that the Alter Rebbe brings, again, just from a logical perspective, is the way that the Torah describes Kriyas Yamsuf. Now, it's not from the fact, the Alter Rebbe's proof is not, from the fact that there was a Kriyas Yamsuf, because again, those heretics deny the miracles of Torah. So that wouldn't prove anything. It's from the way the Torah describes the structure of Kriyas Yamsuf, where the point is that the Rebbeinu Shalom, that Eibishter took water, which has one nature, and gave it a completely opposite nature. But since it was still using water and made it stand like a wall, it's understood that the power that did this had to do it over and over again. And if it were to stop, the water would go back to its nature. And so it is, the Alter Rebbe makes the case logically, intellectually, that every time you take something and you transform it to such an extent, to such a degree, the power that makes that transformation has to be constantly there. Otherwise, the thing would go back to the way it was. Right? We spoke about this a little bit in Avodas Hashem as well. Okay. The next point that the Alter Rebbe makes in Perek Beis of Tanya, going back basically to what it says in Perek Aleph, is that the bottom line is that the Rebbeinu Shalom Hashem does all of this through his words, as hinted to in the pasuk Va'ata Machayas Kulam. It's interesting. Those of you who are studying the Basi Lagani of this year will know that there's a lot of discussion about this idea that the Alter Rebbe mentions here, the concept of Va'ata Machayas Kulam. Va'ata Machayas Kulam, simply, it's a pasuk, right? We quoted in davening. It means you, Hashem, give life to everything. But Chazal teach us that it doesn't just mean that Hashem gives life to everything. Don't just read it Machaya, but read it Mahava. Hashem creates everything. What the Alter Rebbe wants here with this is that V'ato symbolizes Hashem's power of speech. Because Ato is Aleph, Tov, Hey. Aleph, Tov means the letters from Aleph to Tov, and Hey is a moshel, is it's called Hey Moitzos Apeh, which is an analogy for the mouth of a person having 5 different positions, or 5 different ways, methods that it uses to produce sounds, to produce these letters from Aleph to Tov. Ato being Hashem's power to create, that power, that godly power that is responsible for the creation and the recreation every single second of all existing things. Okay. All right. Perek Beis concludes. This was supposed to be a short summary, but Perek Beis concludes with a question. The Alter Rebbe actually asks. Basically, the Alter Rebbe's question is: we keep talking about Hashem's speech, and the letters of Hashem's speech, and things like that. And the Alter Rebbe says, but Hashem has no body, and Hashem has no image of a body, and no form of a body. So what's this obsession with Hashem's speech? All right, the Alter Rebbe makes a few points in answering the question. Number one, he says we find this everywhere in Pesukim. We're not making this up. This, Vayomer Hashem, Vayidaber Hashem. What does he say? The Alter Rebbe says, Vayidaber Hashem, Vayomer Hashem, etc. We find it everywhere. So this is not a novel concept here. We find this everywhere. That's number one. And number two, what does it mean? So the Alter Rebbe says what it means is that similar to what we find by Nevi'im, by prophets, that they would have some type of godly experience, and this godly experience would germinate, if you will, in the minds of the hearts and the minds of the prophets in such a way that that messages came through. They had, they had some type of understanding. After that, they were able to communicate verbally what it is that Hashem told them. So if this is true concerning the prophets, right? And the prophets, Alter Rebbe says, lived in the world of Bria, and they were receiving communication from Olam Atzilus. All right, so it is with every created being that somehow Hashem communicates with them, if you will. Hashem sends some kind of message, and yes, of course, oisiest letters, the way human beings have them, the way we understand them, this, of course, is true only in our world. Obviously, in Hashem's world, there's no goof, there's no body, there's none of these limitations. But yet, we find somehow that Hashem communicates or, gives over these types of messages. Again, we learned a little bit about this last week. So just like it's true with Nevi'im, again, this is my simple understanding of what's written here. Just like it's true with Nevi'im, so too it's true with all created beings, that there is this concept of the divine letters of Hashem that are manifest, that are expressed into all created beings and keep them in existence. Right, we're going to continue today with Perek Gimel. If you have lessons in Tanya, we're on page 851. Otherwise, if you have just the Hebrew, we're daf Ayin Ches. V'hinei, says the Alter Rebbe Perek Gimel. Acharei hadvorim v'ho'emes oil. After the above words and the above truth, everything that's been explained, we're focused now on the point. The idea that Hashem, that any existence that exists, again, be it in lower worlds or higher worlds, can only exist because there's a godly force that is recreating it every single second. After these words and this truth, kol maskil al davar, every maskil in the lessons in time they translate as every discerning person, every thinking person, Yovin la'ashuroi will understand profoundly, will come to a profound conclusion. And that is, kol nivra v'yesh, how every created being and every existence, ube'emes is truly nechshav, is truly considered ayin ve'efes mamash. It's truly considered absolute nothingness. Lagabe koyach hapoil, relative in relation to the koyach hapoil, to the godly force that is active within it, bringing it into existence. V'ruach piv, and the breath of Hashem's mouth, that is in this created being. Hamachaya oisoi tomid, that constantly gives it life. Umoitziyoi me'ayin mamash liyesh, and constantly brings it, extracts it from ayin, from nothingness, mamash, from absolute nothingness, into yesh, into an existence. Okay. So when you first start, this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying is like this. What the Alter Rebbe is saying is, you got to think this through. And if you think this through, you come to a profound conclusion. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying. You come to a profound conclusion. And the Alter Rebbe will make the case that this conclusion is supposed to rock our world, pardon the expression, and really revolutionize the way we see and see everything and think of everything. And this is a paradigm, according to the Alter Rebbe, in Shaar Hayichud ve'Emunah, this is a paradigm shift that shifts all of our other paradigm shifts. The paradigm shift of all paradigm shifts. This is supposed to be the kind of stuff that if you think into it, you never recover from this. This is, I may have told you this before, but when I was a kid, there was a conversation around our Shabbos table that left a profound impact on me. I couldn't have been older than 7 or 8 years old. And there was a woman around our Shabbos table, may she live and be well, who had started studying Chassidus with my father. She hadn't been studying, and I don't think for that long, maybe a year or two. And, they were talking about it around the table, and this woman said, Chassidus is like a virus. I'm a little kid sitting there, and I'm so offended. Chassidus is like a virus? What, are you kidding me? I mean, I was too young to have studied any of it, but I knew that a virus wasn't a good thing, and I knew that Chassidus was a good thing. So why are you saying Chassidus is like a virus? And I watched my father light up, like it's July 4th, like he just loved that. And she explained, she says, once it gets into your system, there's no way to get rid of it. there's no antidote, right? If it's bacterial, you can take antibacterial. If it's viral, that's it. It's in your system and it's stuck there. So the idea is that this is the Alter Rebbe saying, this is the kind of truth. This is these truths and these words. Once they get into our system, they're supposed to revolutionize. If we think into them, they revolutionize everything. Okay, so what's this? So what's the idea? So first, let's say the words that the Alter Rebbe is saying. Then we'll try to unpack it a little bit. What are the words? The words are, the Alter Rebbe is saying that if you think this through, you come to a profound conclusion. So here it is. There's 2 steps in this. The first step is the one the Alter Rebbe explains in Perek Aleph and Beis, which is the idea that in order for something to exist, let's use this pen as an analogy, right? So in order for this pen to exist, there has to be a koyach, there's got to be a divine power in this pen that's constantly recreating it every single second. Okay. Were it to stop, the pen would cease to exist. The pen would become, in the words of Tanya, the pen would become ayin ve'efes mamash, absolute nothingness and naught, like before the 6 days of creation mamash. And therefore, we look at this and we say, it only exists, you hear the words, it only exists because there's a force I got to pick up the pen a little higher so we put it in the screen, is this thing only exists because there's a divine specific energy tailor-made for this pen at this time that keeps it in existence every single second, and were the godly force to withdraw from it, the pen would cease to exist. That's step one. Step two, says the Alter Rebbe, if you think, you come to the next conclusion, which is what? That even now that the godly energy is invested in this pen and is constantly recreating it every single second, the pen still doesn't exist. Now, how could you say that? A godly energy is creating it. How can you say it doesn't exist? Yes, a godly energy is creating it, but is it really? It's creating it in such a way that even though it's creating it, it still doesn't exist. And it remains iron. If you compare the existence of the pen to the existence of the godly energy that creates it, we'd have to come to the conclusion and say that this shekol nivra v'yesh, that every created being who be'emes is really nechshav l'ayin ve'efes mamash, is considered ayin ve'efes mamash. So although the godly energy, here's the idea, although the godly energy is going through all the trouble to create this thing, and this time to create it once, over and over and over and over again, bottom line, that still doesn't really exist, right? Because the be'emes ayin ve'efes mamash, Lagabe, when you compare it to the godly energy that creates it, we'd have to come to the conclusion and say it doesn't exist. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all, right? Again, the godly energy does create it. But to say that its existence is significant in any way, or to say that its existence, here's the word, to say that its existence is real in any way, we cannot say that. The godly energy that creates it, that's real existence. But the thing that's being created, it's not really in existence. It's existing only because the Dvar Hashem pushes into existence every single second, over and over and over again. And if we were to stop for a second, it would cease to exist. So again, just to clarify, point number one, the created being wouldn't exist without the godly energy pushing it into existence every single second. Point two, even after the godly power pushes it into existence every second, it still doesn't really exist because you can't call that real existence. The Dvar Hashem, the word of Hashem that pushes it into existence, that you can call real existence. But the created being, you can't call that a real existence. Okay. That's what's written here. The rest of the parak of Tanya will focus really on a question of why we can't see that, right? So if that's the case, why, when we look at the world, does it look so real? But this idea that the world looks like its existence looks so powerful and looks so real, this is an illusion. Not, again, let's be crystal clear what Alter Rebbe is saying. The Alter Rebbe is not saying that the existence of the world is an illusion. He's not saying that. The existence of the world is real because Hashem created it. But the fact that its existence appears to be a real existence, the fact that the existence looks like it has some kind of power to it, and definitely the fact that the existence seems to be independent, this is completely an illusion. This part is completely an illusion. Again, it's not an illusion to say that the world exists because Hashem created it. But the fact that its existence looks real, the fact that its existence looks like it holds, the fact that the existence appears to hold on to its own existence, and we don't see that it's necessary for there to be a force to bring it into existence every single second. And definitely the fact that the physical existence doesn't reveal that Hashem is recreating it every single second, that part is an illusion. Let's read a few more lines. Masha kol nivra v'nifal niro lanu liyesh umamashas. The fact that every created being appears to us to be a yesh, appears to us to be in existence. Umamashas, and the existence has real substance to it. Zehu machmas she'enanu masigim. This is only because we don't understand. V'roim b'nei basar. We cannot see with our human eyes. Es koyach Hashem, es koyach Havaya, the power of the Eibishter. v'ruach piv, and the breath of Hashem's mouth, shebanivra, which is in every single existence. Aval ilu nitna reshus la'ayin lirais. But if permission would be given to the physical, our eyes, to see, ulahasig esachayis v'ruchnius, and to understand the chayas, understand the life, baruchnis, and the spirituality, shebechol niva, that is in every created being, hashefeya boy mimoitza piavai, that is constantly pumping into it from the words of Hashem, v'ruach piv, and the breath of Hashem's mouth. Loihoya gashmis hanivra v'chumay mamash nira klal. We wouldn't see the materialism, we wouldn't see the gashmias of the creation, of the created being, umamoshes, and its substance. We wouldn't see it at all. Kihu bottled b'metzias mamash, because it is completely nullified in existence. Lagabe achayis v'ruchnias shaboy, when you compare it to the godly energy, the spiritual energy which is in it. Because were it not for this spiritual power, vaefs mamash, and again he repeats, it would be absolute nothing, just like before the 6 days of creation. So again, Alter Rebbe is saying, if we had real eyes, right? If we could taka see, what it is that was really going on in this world, and how everything is constantly being renewed and recreated by the power of Hashem that's within us, then we wouldn't see the physical as an existence for itself. We wouldn't see and we wouldn't see it because it's bottled by Metzias Mamash. Okay. So again, on a simple level, this is relatively easy to understand, right? If you see, like again, the mashal that the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring, but if you see a stone flying through the air, so nobody's going to look at it and say, there's a flying stone. Stones don't fly. Everybody will understand that there's a koyach that's pushing it, right? Or if you see an electronic device, if you see a self-driving car, that's driving around in the streets, so nobody's going to say, what, all of a sudden, cars have, maybe this may be a little bit of a sensitive muscle, but nobody's going to say cars can all of a sudden drive on their own. It's understood that there's a program, that there's something that was produced by a person that produced this, that's working here, because metal and plastic and things like this on their own would never be able to do this kind of thing by themselves, etc., etc. All right, with artificial intelligence, this is maybe not such a simple marshal, but be it as it may, you understand the idea. Okay. Now, when our teachers taught us Tanya, and it came to this part, so they added a very important ingredient into the understanding of these lines, of these couple lines of Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe says that if you think into this deeply, you come to a profound understanding that nothing else really exists other than Hashem. That they added a dimension to the understanding of it. I'm going to try to give it over to the best of my limited ability, but it's a very important part, and it's crucial for the understanding of it. Later on in this parak, the Alter Rebbe will compare, to illustrate this idea, the Alter Rebbe will compare every existence to what he'll call Oir Hashemesh B'Shemesh, the light of the sun that's inside the sun. So this idea will be related also to the mashal of Oir Hashemesh B'Shemesh. So here's the way I understand it. There's a tremendous depth here. Let's say you tell a person, tell me a new concept. So the person will tell you, well, a new concept, self-driving cars. No, I'm kidding. A new concept, whatever. A new concept, elephants that can fly, fish that can give chassidus shiurim, whatever, a new concept. So sooner or later you'll discover that human beings are incapable of producing new concepts. I heard, maybe I told you this before, I don't remember. I heard that in interrogation, the Alter Rebbe was asked if he can prove that Hashem exists. They asked Alter Rebbe in interrogation. When he was imprisoned, in one of his imprisonments, they asked him if he can prove that Hashem exists. And the Alter Rebbe said, if he didn't exist, it would not be possible for us to have a conversation about whether he exists or not. Which is, again, that's the story that I heard. Again, which is an illustration of this idea. The Alter Rebbe is saying, if there was no such thing, human beings would never have been able to concoct this existence out of this concept out of nowhere, because we don't have that ability. We can only work, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, we can only work with Yesh Miyesh. We can't work with Yesh Ma'ayin. To come up with a new concept, the human mind is incapable of this. So this, our teachers explained to us, it's not just a technicality, right? A human being can't come up with a new concept. No. The pshat is that within the realm of humanity, within the realm of a human being, within the world of a human being, the coming up with new concepts is not possible. This is an impossibility. Just like a human being cannot physically create something out of nothing, so too intellectually it's basically the same thing. So intellectually, we also cannot create something out of nothing. It's not possible for a human being to do. But the Eibishter could, of course. Just like the Eibishter could create a physical existence. The Alter Rebbe himself says the Alter Rebbe also creates spiritual existences. Okay. So when the Eibishter creates, let's say, for example, a concept, the Eibishter creates a concept. So this concept that the Eibishter created exists conceptually only within the world and the reality of Hashem. Because only Hashem makes it possible for this concept to exist. Without Hashem's existence, so to speak, the concept also wouldn't be able to exist. Not just the technical, physical existences wouldn't be able to exist. Conceptually, the ideas wouldn't be able to exist also. So even when Hashem creates them, so to speak, Hashem creates them within himself. So when we experience these concepts, in truth, we're experiencing godliness, because they exist only within the realm of Hashem. If to give a shtickle mashal for this, right? Let's say, not an accurate mashal, but a mashal nevertheless. Let's say you're studying a particular concept, right? Whatever the case may be, any intellectual concept, mathematics, lahavdil, chassidus, and you get stuck. There's something you don't understand. So you go to a teacher, and the teacher explains it to you. So when the teacher is first explaining it to you, at the beginning, at least, the Gemara says it takes 40 years for the Talmud to reach the level of the Rav. So in the beginning, the Talmud doesn't really understand what it is that the teacher is saying, because the concept is difficult. The concept is removed, let's say, from the ability of the Talmud. So what's the Rav doing? Basically, the Rav is giving the Talmud oisia, is giving them words. He's maybe making physical gestures. He's teaching. In the meanwhile, temporarily, just hear me out. In the meanwhile, temporarily, the Talmud is kind of transported into the world of the teacher. The student is basically trying to experience it from the perspective, from the world of the teacher. That means that student needs to bring the teacher needs to bring the student into their world. And then slowly, from the teacher's perspective, the student is able to learn to understand this. You know where you see this idea incredibly powerfully? In the Alter Rebbe's introduction to Tanya. The Alter Rebbe's introduction to Tanya, he writes very briefly. I mean, he doesn't write it briefly, I just want to make the point very briefly. The Alter Rebbe writes that the Alter Rebbe writes that Tanya takes the place of Yechidus. So Alter Rebbe says, he asks, but if a person is in darkness, then how is learning from a sefer going to help? You need a teacher, the Alter Rebbe says. If a person is in darkness, you need a teacher to lift you out of that darkness. As long as you're in the darkness, the sefer is not going to help. How can I say, the Alter Rebbe asks himself, how can I say that Tanya is going to take the place of Yechidus? How can Tanya take the place of Yechidus? Tanya is a sefer. When you learn a sefer, You're stuck in your own world. Whatever you're reading, you're interpreting in your own world. As opposed to when you're actually physically sitting in front of your teacher, the teacher has the ability to transport you to their world, and from there you can see the answers to the questions. How can I say that Tanya takes the place of the Alter Rebbe asks us? Right, the Alter Rebbe answers because I'm writing the Tanya to people that I know personally, and therefore we already have that relationship. So the Sefer is an extension of the relationship that I already have with Chassidim. That's Alter Rebbe answers. But the principle of the idea is true. In order to graduate truly to a higher level of understanding, you need first to move into the teacher's world as much as a student can, and then to see things from the perspective of the teacher, and then you can understand it. And then once you've understood it, the student can even go off on their own, and master and bring it down into their own kelim, bring it down into their own mind. But first, they need to experience it in the world of the teacher, which is why anybody who has collected any amount of real wisdom in anything, always remains psychologically very powerfully connected to their teacher. They can they can hear their teacher's voices in their heads for the rest of their lives, teaching them this. Moshe Kibbutz Torah Misinai. So what Alter Rebbe is saying over here is that these created existences that Hashem creates, Hashem doesn't just create the technical existence of it. Hashem creates the very possibility, the very concept of these existences. The concept also has to be created, and when it's created only within the context of Elokus. Within Elokus, it's possible. Outside of Elokus, it's not possible. Nothing else exists besides for Elokus. So once you move into this world, you now understand. So it's not the pshat. So it's not the pshat that Hashem is, so to speak, over here, and the created existence is over here. And Hashem creates the existence constantly every single second. Were it to stop, the creation would cease to exist, would fall out of the realm of existence. So now we understand that this existence compared to this existence is ayin ve'efes mamish. No, it's much deeper than that. The pshat is that even when the Eibishter creates, everything that he's creating, again, in the Moshel of the Alter Rebbe that he'll give soon, is like Ziv HaShemesh B'Shemesh, is included within the world of Elokus. Elokus makes it possible, godliness makes it possible for these things to exist conceptually and practically. So then, once you understand that, so now when you look at a physical chair or a physical pen, where's my pen? Now when you look at a physical pen and you see this pen looks like it exists on its own without Elokus, so Alter Rebbe is saying you come to understand that that's a lie. Not the fact that the pen exists is a lie. The pen's existence is not a lie. But its existence outside of Elokus, that part's a lie, which is the way we see it. And by the way, now I'm saying this on my own, it could be that this is the reason why the Alter Rebbe does not want to give the mashal of Zrikas Evan, even though in other places in Chassidus it does give it, the mashal of the throwing of the stone. But it could be here the Alter Rebbe doesn't want to give it, because by the throwing of the stone, beferish, the pshat is that the person throws the stone away from themselves. The throwing of the stone experience doesn't happen within the person. It's a moshel. It's a moshel to show that something that cannot do something on its own needs a koyach that constantly pushes it. If the koyach goes away, it ceases to exist. Fine, but there's a technicality here. The technicality is that because it's basically yesh miyesh, the person throwing the stone is basically yesh miyesh. So the person could throw the stone many feet away from themselves. The Alter Rebbe prefers the mashal, which he'll give again later on in Parag Gimel. We'll learn it next week in Mitzvah Hashem, of the light of the sun, which is within the sun, because that brings out this point, which is that all of this that's happening is all happening not just physically within Elokus, conceptually within godliness. And so, therefore, in order to understand what it means that Hashem created anything, we have to understand that everything that's being created all exists within Elokus. If to extend my mashal, it would be where a student goes to a teacher and take what the teacher is teaching, it's not possible for the student to understand, ever. To explain something that makes absolutely, that 1 + 1 = 3. Right? Imagine the teacher is teaching 1 + 1 = 3, but 1 + 1 = 3. There's no such thing. Doesn't make a difference how many. But if the teacher's world is a world which supersedes intellect, then it is possible. But then the student cannot work with the kalim, with the vessels that the student has. The student has to burn everything they know and move into a different world completely. To experience that over there, now you're moving not just in that world, 1 + 1 = 3. If in that world 1 + 1 = 3, 1 + 1 = 3 doesn't exist in the way that we understand existence. It's just somehow in a different world, in the world of a teacher. In the world of a teacher, in the world of beyond logic. So over there, everything is different. I'll conclude just with the way my teacher worded it. He said there's different types of miracles, right? There's Kriyas Yamsuf, the Alter talks about over here. And there's another example the Mishnah talks about, the Gemara talks about, called Mokam Oren Eina Min Amida. Mokam Oren Eina Min Amida means it's a very famous miracle where the Oren Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim both took up space and didn't take up space at the same time, right? So he said like this. He said, in the days of Kriyas Yamsuf, there was no such thing as cameras. But imagine there was. Imagine somebody was there with an iPhone. And he captured Kriyas Yamsuf. What would we see? We would see everything exactly as the Torah tells us. We would see the wind, we would see the water stand up like a wall, we would see the Yidden walk through, we would see Kriyas Yamsuf, we would see everything. We would see the Egyptians drowning, amazing. Pity there were no iPhones then, right? It would have made some fantastic footage. All right, Nijikibet, fine. He says, what about if again, when my teacher taught this to me, there were no iPhones, but there were video cameras. What about if someone would take an iPhone and go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? I'm going to try to record that the Aron Kodesh both takes up space and doesn't take up space at the same time. This is what he said. He said a video camera would never be able to capture it. Either the video camera will capture the Elokus that's shining in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in which case it'll capture the miracle too. Or nothing, you'll walk inside and see an Aron, and that's the end of it. Why? Because Mokum Oren Eina Min Amida isn't just a miracle. Kriyas Yamsuf is also a miracle. Mokum Oren Eina Min Amida is something which the mind cannot even conceive of. It's the closest thing we'll ever come to a new concept. It can only be appreciated, experienced, v'chulu, only within the context of the revelation of godliness that existed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's it. People would sometimes say that they'd have certain questions and Chassidus questions and Amunah, different questions. They'd go into the Rebbe for Yechidus. The Rebbe would give them the answer. And at the time that the Rebbe gave them the answer, it was so clear that it was like Mamash was shining. And then you walk out of the Rebbe's room 5 minutes later, either you don't remember what the Rebbe said, or even if you remember, like, I don't understand one word. So what happened? What happened is he walked into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there's Elokus. Outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, there isn't that type of revelation of Elokus. So there you start to grapple with it as on a human level. So what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that everything that was created exists really only within the realm of Elokus. If we were able to see that, we wouldn't see a physical world. We would see only a godly and divine reality. All right, this is what's written here. Take a quick look at the comments. Somebody wrote, oh, this is okay for me to say. It was written to me privately, but I'm not saying who it is. Somebody wrote, this happened to me. They were in I won't say where. They were in a very special place, a place clearly of divine revelation, and they were unable to take videos or photos. Yeah. That's how it goes. Because the photo and the video will never capture. So this gives a little bit of depth and deeper meaning to what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here, that if the physical eye was given the ability to see, it wouldn't see a Gashmiistic world. Even though we're not saying that Hashem didn't create a Gashmiistic world. Hashem did, but it's all completely within the realm of Elokus. Okay. Thank you very much for being here.